Lee Marvin once told the truth about the 7 stars he didn't like. There was a lot of war history in his family. He was born in New York City on February 19, 1924. His dad had been in the war in 1918, and his brother was also going to serve. Being taught discipline and service at a young age gave Marvin the tough guy image and rough personality that would later define his acting career. Marvin went to schools in Florida and New Jersey as a boy, but he was always bored, rebellious, and in trouble. He had a wild side that would finally fuel the raw intensity of his performances because he had a hard time with the strict structure of school. He joined the U.S. Marine Corps when he was only 18 years old, and his life changed a lot after World War II. Marvin fought in the Pacific Theater with the 4th Marine Division. In 1944, he took part in the terrible Battle of Saipan. He was hit hard by machine gun fire and hurt badly, being shot in the buttocks and sciatic nerve. He got the Purple Heart and spent more than a year getting better in a military hospital. Both physically and mentally, the experience scarred him, but it also gave him a depth and authenticity that made his roles as soldiers, outlaws, and tough guys stand out. In contrast to many artists who played heroes for a living, Marvin had actually been through the chaos of battle. People could tell that his acts were real because he was suffering himself. After the war, he went from job to job until he got a job as a plumber's helper at a community theater. That's when he started acting, which was not what he had planned. By chance, Marvin's first job as an actor was filling in for a sick performer. That short time on stage lit a spark, and with the help of teachers, he went to the American Theater Wing in New York to get official training. He got a lot of attention right away because he was tall, rough, and naturally fierce. He went from stage shows to movies. In his early years in Hollywood, Marvin was played as tough guys, bad guys, and military men, mostly in westerns and war movies. In the 1950s, he got his big break with memorable parts like the ruthless gangster in The Big Heat 1953 and the scary thug in Bad Day at Black Rock 1955, where his presence added to the drama. During that decade, Marvin became known as one of Hollywood's most reliable bad guys, giving every part grit and menace. But in the 1960s, he went from being a safe supporting actor to a real star. In John Ford's classic 1962 western The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Marvin gave a memorable performance as the violent outlaw Liberty Valance. He was able to hold his own with John Wayne and James Stewart, making Liberty Valance one of the best bad guys in Western movies ever. He surprised people again with Cat Ballou 1965, in which he was surprisingly funny and brilliant. Marvin was so good at balancing humor and tragedy as both the drunk shooter Kid Shalene and the scary Tim Strong that he won the Academy Award for Best Actor, solidifying his place as one of Hollywood's best actors. Because of this hit, Marvin became one of the most sought-after starring men of his time. He played the lead role in The Dirty Dozen 1967, a very important war movie that ruled the box office and became a cultural icon. Marvin gave a great performance as Major John Reisman, the tough officer in charge of a group of prisoners on a dangerous mission. His performance not only amazed viewers, but it also changed the way war and action films were made for years to come. Point Blank 1967. A stylish neon thriller in which Marvin played a cold, unstoppable anti-hero, and Pain Your Wagon 1969, a musical in which he surprised everyone by singing in a gruff, off-key way that made the songs memorable. Marvin never really lived up to Hollywood standards, even though he did well at the box office. He liked being on his own and didn't give in to the pressures of celebrity society. He wasn't really interested in fame. Marvin instead found peace in easy things like fishing, boating, and being outside. He often ran away to his homes in Baja California, Mexico, and Tucson, Arizona, to live in peace and quiet away from the attention of everyone. He was also honest about his problems with drinking, which sometimes hurt his work and his relationships with other people. As the years went by, Marvin kept giving great performances in films like Emperor of the North 1973, The Klansman 1974, Avalanche Express 1979, and Gorky Park 1983. He never lost his screen personality as he got older. He stayed a strong leader whose tough, uncompromising manhood seemed more and more uncommon in Hollywood today. In 1986, he made his last movie appearance in Delta Force, co-starring Chuck Norris. In it, he played a seasoned military leader, which was a fitting end to his long career as an action star. Marvin's life outside of TV was just as exciting. During his early rise in Hollywood in April 1952, he married Betty Ibling. They were married for 15 years and had 4 children together. Christopher Lamont Marvin, who lived from 1952 to 2013, was the first child and passed on the family name until he died many years later. Their three girls were Courtney Lee Marvin, Cynthia Louise Marvin, and Claudia Leslie Marvin. They were born between 1958 and 2012. Even though Marvin's work and personal problems were rough at times, becoming a father brought balance and responsibility into his life, keeping him grounded in the chaos of being a Hollywood star. Lee Marvin was known for being a tough, no-nonsense actor on screen, but people who knew him well often said that his children showed a softer, more private side of him that was very different from how he was on screen. But his marriage to Betty Ibling was anything but smooth, even though he had family to help him stay grounded. The constant demands of Hollywood, along with Marvin's drinking and acting in strange ways, made the relationship more and more difficult. Their marriage ended for good in January 1967, after being apart for 2 years. Lee and Betty's split was hard, but it was even worse for their 4 kids, who had to deal with life in between the glitz of Hollywood and the broken home life. After many years, in 2010, Betty wrote her book Tales of a Hollywood Housewife, in which she talked about their life together during Marvin's rise to fame. In the book, she wrote about both the good and bad things about being married to a man whose job took up so much of his time. She told everyone that Marvin had been cheating on her, saying he had an affair with a woman who claimed to be an actor and braffed. This made Marvin's already troubled personal life even more complicated. People were still interested in Marvin's relationships after the split, not only for their relationship but also for the groundbreaking palimony case that followed. His long-term relationship with Michelle Triola made him famous. The case, which happened in the 1970s, tested the legal rights of people who are not married and made news across the country. After all the trouble of that chapter, Marvin eventually got back in touch with Pamela Feely, the girl he loved as a boy. It wasn't just a late-life romance that brought them back together. It was a return to what Marvin knew and liked, and a piece of the simpler life he had lived before becoming famous in Hollywood. Lee Marvin married Pamela Feely in 1970. This marriage lasted much longer than the ones that came before it. Pamela was always there for him in the last few years of his career, and when his health got worse in the 1980s, she stayed by his side until he died in 1987. 10 years later, in 1997, she wrote Lee, a romance that was both a tribute to their love story and to her husband's memory. In her book, Pamela not only told stories from their shared life, but she also painted a personal picture of the man behind the image of the gruff anti-hero. People saw Marvin as the tough star of the TV shows Dirty Dozen and Point Blank. Pamela also saw that he was weak, loving, and very human. The memoir was both a tribute and a love letter to Marvin. It made sure that his legacy lived on in more ways than just his movie parts. It lived on in friendships, family, and loyalty. Marvin was known for being honest when he wasn't with his family or friends. He never tried to hide how he felt, so when he told Hollywood straight out that there were stars he couldn't stand, it shocked everyone. When asked to name people, Marvin didn't think twice. He named 7 guys whose personalities or jobs had been at odds with his own. Each name had a history of rivalries, insults, or ideological differences that showed as much about Marvin's own beliefs as it did about the people he criticized. John Wayne was one of them. People thought they respected each other because they worked together on war films and westerns, but Marvin had a different opinion. Their fight started while they were making Comancheros and came up again when they were competing for an Academy Award. Marvin, who had fought and died in didn't like Wayne's carefully created image as a war hero, even though Wayne had never served. He is said to have said that Wayne was the best soldier actor, but that he could never handle the mud, blood, and bullets of real battle. Political disagreements made things even worse. When it came to politics, Marvin couldn't stand Wayne's strict conservatism. The tension between them lasted until Marvin died. Charles Bronson was another name on his list. Marvin thought Bronson was cold and only cared about himself, even though the two of them were in a lot of the same gritty action films. He thought Bronson relied too much on being tough physically and not enough on having deep emotions, which Marvin thought was important for real acting. Marvin had a lot of problems with Charles Bronson, and not just with how he acted. He often said that Bronson was cold and didn't want to interact with the other actors. The actor's moody, distant personality was very different from Marvin's direct, aggressive style. He said something very mean when he joked, "Working with Bronson is like talking to a wall, except the wall has more personality." This time it was Robert Mitchum. Both men were known for having tough film looks, but they never agreed on anything. Marvin said Mitchum was lazy because he often showed up to work unprepared or still drunk. He didn't like how Mitchum seemed to be able to coast through parts. Mitchum, on the other hand, made fun of Marvin's passion by saying he was too dramatic. At one Hollywood party, their anger exploded when Marvin said that Mitchum was sleepwalking through whole films. Mitchum replied with a sharp line, "I don't scream my lines like I'm still in boot camp, that's for sure." Also on Marvin's list of bad people was Telly Savalas. Marvin didn't like actors who cared more about how they looked than the skill itself. That flaw was summed up for him in Savalas. He didn't like how Savalas kept promoting himself, how obsessed he was with his bald head, and how often he got into fights with directors. Marvin is said to have called him a peacock in combat boots and said he was trying to steal the show during The Dirty Dozen. The stress got so high that the crew had to keep the two apart between takes some of the time. Yul Brynner was another name that caught Marvin's attention. Marvin didn't like Bryner's stiff royal attitude, which he thought was the opposite of how he usually behaved, which was rough around the edges. He said Brynner was a control freak who was always demanding camera angles that showed him in the best light. He once said Brynner doesn't do anything. He just waits for the light to hit him right. Their dislike for each other got so bad that Marvin allegedly turned down a job when he heard Brynner had been cast, saying, "I'd rather drink battery acid than share a scene with him." Tony Curtis was also looked down upon by Marvin. For Marvin, Curtis stood for everything fake about Hollywood. Beautiful looks, smooth charm, and fame without substance. Marvin believed in gritty, hard-earned authenticity, which was at odds with Curtis's flashiness and romantic lead parts. He really didn't like how Curtis could keep up his image as a pretty boy, while Marvin, who had been hurt in the war, had to make a name for himself as a tough guy. Marvin scoffed, Tony Curtis wouldn't last 2 minutes in a pub fight, yet they treat him like some kind of legend. That Frank Sinatra was on Marvin's list might have been the most surprising name on it. Sinatra was a singer and actress who was loved all over the world, but Marvin couldn't stand him. Basically, he said that he was cocky, moody, and often rude to the cast and crew. When it came to Marvin, Sinatra's fame didn't make up for his bad behavior, and it made him another co-worker Marvin couldn't stand. Marvin didn't put up with behavior he thought was inappropriate, and his problems with Frank Sinatra showed that. He didn't like how Sinatra always showed up late and left early, and he expected whole shows to work around his schedule. Their problems got worse during the work on The Dirty Dozen. Sinatra was originally involved with the project, but later pulled out, which made Marvin dislike him forever. He later gave an honest summary of how he felt. For some reason, Sinatra feels like everyone should praise him just for going into a room. This list of 7 stars that Marvin didn't like said as much about his own stubbornness as it did about the men on the list. A decorated Marine with scars on his body and a harsh, unvarnished view of life. He couldn't stand what he saw as Hollywood's pride, laziness, or big egos. Whether Marvin's complaints were fair or just a reflection of his harsh personality, he never changed his mind. He would rather burn bridges with someone he didn't like than act like he respected them. And he carried this doubt with him all his life. He smoked and drank a lot, and it showed in his later years. Due to problems from coccidioidomyosis, Marvin had to stay in the hospital for more than 2 weeks in December 1986. He had trouble breathing, so steroids were given to him to help him breathe. He had to have a colectomy because the treatment caused major intestinal ruptures. He died of a heart attack on August 29, 1987. He was 63 years old. Veterans were present at Arlington National Cemetery to lay him to rest. A proper honor for both his service as a Marine and his larger-than-life movie presence.